Good morning, everyone. It's, I guess 10:15. And I'd like to call the meeting of the Texas Behavioral Health Executive Council to order. And thanks so much for tolerating my late arrival. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for being here. Just one point of courtesy. I'm so sorry that we are going to be missing Janine Smith. I imagine she'll be replaced sometime soon. She's stepped away from her public service, and we're so grateful for her many years of service and dedication to her profession. Could we call roll, please?
Sure. Chair Conseco.
Present, finally.
Chair Blimowitz.
Present.
Chair Brumley.
Present.
Dr. Cartwright.
Here.
Chair Hallbauer.
Here.
Mr. Parrish won't be with us this morning. Ms. Pryor.
Present.
And of course, Dr. Taylor.
Present.
You got a quorum, madam.
Thank you. Today we're going to take general public comments. Public comments are limited to 3 minutes per person, unless there's a question or a reason to extend that. We probably cannot discuss or take action on any matter that is not also on the agenda, except to add something to a future meeting. So let me call on Philip Crum.
Madam Chair, also while Mr. Crumb's making his way up, because Mr. Parrish was not able to be here today, I would recommend that we excuse his absence.
Okay, go ahead. Do I need a motion?
You just say he's excused.
He's excused.
There you go.
Thank you. Morning, Mr. Crum.
Check your mic. Tap the
little
button there.
Thanks. No. Did it turn green when you punched it? Punch it again.
Or a harder punch.
Gregor. We need you, sir.
Testing. There we go. My name's Philip Crum. I'm the AMP co-founder, and I'm just a citizen of Texas. And after the last 2 board meetings, I think I figured out why this room is almost empty every time we meet. And I think I know why you go through volunteer public members like salt through a goose. Most of these people who speak up in person or by Zoom put a lot of thought into what they want to say. They're scared to death just to speak in public. And they get treated like cattle just to make sure you have plenty of time to spend discussing non-binding political opinion messages to the legislature that only represent the beliefs of the board members. Why should anyone want to get up at 3 o'clock in the morning to drive here and 4 hours back through 2 rush hours, only to run the risk of having some red-faced volunteer bang a $5 Walmart gavel and bark at them in public? They're not coming back. You know how hard it is to get people to do this? They're scared to death, and they're convinced by your actions that you're not listening. I understand there have to be limits of some type, but for crying out loud, let people have their say. If it adds an extra 5 to 10 minutes to the meeting, that's okay. You say you want input and you read everything, but your obvious focus during public comment is on the egg timer. To the public members on all 4 boards that are not speaking up, we have several that are. Appreciate that. Your job is to represent and protect the people of Texas, to ask the hard questions that I'd ask if I was sitting in your chair, to make the professional members question themselves and help them arrive at a point that best serves the public, not to be complicit in the passing of ego-driven rules we don't need, or rubber stamp DEI initiatives cloaked as workforce solutions. I realize the job's not easy and the pay sucks, and you're not here to make friends. Do your job or let someone else have a shot at doing it. 2 of the LPC members publicly messaged the newest public member at his first meeting 3 weeks ago, publicly messaged him that he needed to adopt a groupthink attitude and not rock the boat. That action's a big clue to me as to what those public members are probably told at the water cooler. Don't make any waves, just follow the lead of the pro members. Now, I can't prove that, but the boards have seen 4, 5, 6 public members quit in the past 18 months before their terms were up. I see a pattern. There's a reason this room's empty. We're not going to blame it on COVID.
30 seconds.
80,000 licensees and you can't get 20 people to show up and comment. There's a reason the public members are almost to a person, quiet as church mice and quit early. And that needs to change right now. I'd love to have a rational dialogue with board members, especially the public ones, to encourage them to speak up and hold the professional members accountable. But my 3 minutes are up.
That's correct, Mr. Crum. Your 3 minutes are up. I find your statements inaccurate, insulting, and we are unpaid. Thank you so much. Ms. Mills?
Hello, my name is Kathleen Mills, co-founder of the Association for Mental Health Professionals. Our country and our liberties are in real trouble. We have some existential problems as a nation, and our counseling profession is in direct line of fire. The legacy professional organizations, accrediting bodies, insurance companies, and academia want to run this profession, and they're in the process of destroying it in their takeover. They've abandoned the evidence-based approach for subjective ideology as their standard. And if you subscribe to any organization that promotes woke ideologies or tyranny in any form, then you're funding the problem. I want this council to do its part in returning the entire counselor supply chain to an evidence-based model. Texas is moving away from the woke ideology through legislation, and so should you. I don't envy you that task, but you helped create it, so you get to fix your part in it. I want this council to be a solid line of defense against the assault on my First Amendment conscious rights. The court views my beliefs as property rights, and any rule you pass that represents a threat to those beliefs may be considered a moral injury, and you could land you in court. I want this council and the boards to wake up and recognize your legacy professional organizations that many of you belong to are promoting woke agendas that are normalizing mental illness in the pursuit of something called transhumanism. This is a slippery slope that sees the normalization and assumed acceptance from a sleeping public of the never-ending list of improvements to be made to the human condition. It's a slow drip of altering the human form at a cellular level, includes puberty and hormone blockers, surgeries to match the physical with the client's dysmorphic perception. It also includes the implanting of chips, vaccines to connect us to the internet, and many other invasive medical attempts at approving the imperfections of our Creator God. Yes, this is scientific and very factual. We must stop this madness before it gains more traction. I want the public members of our board to stand up to the professional members. Question everything. Don't be intimidated. You're here to help keep the professional members on the rails. If you do your job right, you may feel ostracized or even bullied, but that's the job you signed up for. Business as usual is not the theater we're living in now, and it's not likely to return in our lifetimes. We
30
need
seconds.
generals and warriors on our boards and the public members with a backbone to ask hard questions and then vote accordingly. We're in a very real war. Our profession has been hijacked, just like the medical community. I want my profession back. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Mills. I think I skipped. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4. No, I didn't. Sorry. Rhonda Kimball?
Now that everybody's pissed off, it's my turn. Great. I am here to be very specific about the matters they're talking about. One, when we talk about ego and arrogance, getting the rule to repeal PhD has nothing to do with mental health, has nothing to do with requirements of our profession. It was pushed through. it's divisive, it's elitist, and it's not okay. And that would be part of this political social agenda of splitting up academia, telling us what to do. We're doing what we're supposed to do out in the field. And as an LPC, not good. It's not good. Truth in advertising. So when we're dealing with insurance companies, which most LPCs won't do now, but there's a great need. And when you talk about work shortage, most people can't afford to pay cash pay. They want to use their insurance, but we have to deal with the bureaucrats, and we have to, with PhD, you do make more money. They have a distinction, because when I'm with Blue Cross, it says I'm a master's level therapist. Master's level, I mean, some of the most boring people I know have PhD after their name. So it doesn't mean they're a good counselor. It just doesn't. And to make those distinctions is unfair, and it messes with our income potential. This is not, I mean, really, I'm not in it for the money. You can look at my fees, but I do work, and it should be fair. Also, conversion therapy, we talk about, oh, you know, Christians, you can't preach the gospel. You can't tell anybody about Jesus in your room. You can't pray with them unless they ask you. So I'm regulated. But if you want to get your penis cut off or give your kid hormone blockers, it's okay. It's okay for teachers to do it. These are our professions that belong to these big lobbyist associations that come here and speak. It's not okay. And they need to be regulated as well. It isn't healthy to do that. We used to call that a phase. Now everybody's living out their fantasies, and mostly it's parents doing it to their kids. We're in charge of mental health. You guys are the rule makers. This is why we're beseeching you. This is why we get up early in the morning to come. And not everybody thinks it's important. I'm not afraid. If you want my license, you can have it. But I'm doing something to help our public.
30 seconds.
Thank you. Please don't put that music on. That's another thing. It's very silly. If anybody's watching on Zoom, it's very silly. We want to be taken seriously. Okay, so I'm trying to honor your time limits. I'm trying to say everything. Sometimes it takes a little bit more. I'm not fired up today, but what we're saying is important. And again, I'd like to ask you to repeal that. It's a problem. PhD.
Thank you, Ms. Kimball. Noah Jones.
Good morning, council members. I am Noah Jones, the public policy analyst for the Texas Counseling Association, the largest professional organization for counselors in the state of Texas. I'm speaking today on two agenda items. One of them is the discussion of PSYPACT, and the other one is the 2023 Mental Health in America report. The 2023 Mental Health in America report contains information about the dire state of mental health care in the state of Texas. Notable data points include 74% of youth in Texas with major depression do not receive mental health treatment. 62% of adults with a mental illness in Texas receive no treatment. Texas ranked third in the nation among states with regards to prevalence of mental illness. Texas had one of the worst mental health provider ratio to individual ratios in the state in this country, 760 to 1. Only Wyoming had a worse ratio than that. And once again, Texas is ranked 51st or last in the country with access to mental health care. These numbers are troubling to say the least. They confirm what we've long known. Texas is experiencing a mental health crisis. To begin addressing these issues that are caused by mental illness, Texas must increase its behavioral health workforce. We appreciate the council for looking at the progress of the Psychologist Interstate Compact. It's exciting to see so many Texas providers are taking advantage of the license portability the compact is offering. Texas is ranked among the top states in the country with both authorities to practice interjurisdictional telepsychology and temporary authorizations to practice. More providers are able to see Texas clients, which benefits the mental health landscape in our state. The success of the Psychologist Compact reinforces the need for other interstate licensure compacts in Texas. TCA advocates for the passage of the Interstate Counseling Compact to better tackle the aforementioned mental health care issues in Texas. The compact will assist our state's issues with lack of access and the workforce shortages related to behavioral health. Issues already exist in areas of our state with few or no mental health care providers, and the compact will seek to increase opportunities for those residents to seek qualified mental health care professionals. Additionally, increased license portability will assist counselors who are in complex situations. Examples include an LPC can continue seeing a student attending college in a different state. And military veterans can continue to see the same provider. And military spouses can easily move licensure when a veteran is relocated. TCA encourages BHEC to continue studying the positive effects of interstate compacts on mental health professions
30
as
seconds.
we move to the next legislative session. We thank the council for its past support of the Counselor Compact, and we hope to see Texas enrolled in the compact in the. Thank you.
And quick question, who are you with again, Mr. Jones?
The Texas Counseling Association.
Thank you.
Hey, Noah, will you, hold on a second, buddy?
Sure.
Did the report show, I'm looking at the report right now, did it show any increase or decrease for Texas over the last 2 to 3 years?
Honestly, it looks about the same.
I'm real familiar with that report. It's,
Pretty much the same.
I mean, it's really the background and impetus for a lot of the things that we've
Yep.
been working on at the psychology board.
Yeah.
So,
And then let me just clarify this. This is Texas ranks 3rd with adults with serious thoughts of suicide. Is that correct?
Yes.
That's 4.18% of our adult population is seriously considering suicide.
Yes, indeed. It's troubling.
That is very troubling.
yeah, it very clearly outlines the what's at stake.
Yes.
I also think it's worsened for the last time we had, in terms of access to mental health, if memory serves, is that we were 49th and now we're 51st.
Yes.
Wow, not good. Thank you so much.
Thank you all so much.
I know that we have comments online, is that right?
Yes, ma'am.
Before we get to those, I was remiss in saying that we don't feel ticked off, but thanks so much.
All right, Madam Chair, I'll go down the list of those appearing virtually wanting to give comment. For the public attending virtually, what I'm going to do is if you've raised your hand, if you've got public comments you want to give, just use the raise hand feature. I will then unmute you and let you know your time to talk, and Mr. Hyde will run the timer on that to let you know when your time expires. So first up is going to be Miss Sandra Martin. Sandra, do you have public comments you want to give? Miss Martin? Okay, we'll go back to her. Sandra, we'll come back to you. Dr. Growthuse, you have public comments you want to give?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Spinks. And Chair Canseco, I appreciate the opportunity to ask this question. It is regarding Rule Proposal 463.31, the minimum passing scores for the jurisprudence test. We appreciate, oh, and by the way, I am Dr. Carol Growthuse. I am Chair of the TSBEP BHEC Monitoring Committee for the Texas Psychological Association. And my job is just to get more information from the boards to find out and pass on to the psychologists at TPA. And one of the concerns that we have is that there were 2 issues that were brought up about the jurisprudence test. One was a scoring glitch that a member said that she thought was happening on the program. And I was hoping that you could address and make sure that wasn't the case. And the second issue was the providing improved study guides prior to taking the jurisprudence test to see if that had happened rather than lowering the score. So if we could address those 2 things, and I can take that back and reassure the members that those 2 areas were addressed. I do appreciate Dr. Becker's conscientiousness in determining this recommendation for lowering the score to 85%. We just want to make sure that is the way to rectify the problem in the best way. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Grothues.
Okay. Miss Martin, are you with us now? Sandra?
Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, good. I'm using a new laptop, so I wasn't sure about it. I have very little to say except good morning to all of you. And in watching and listening to the insight meetings that we've had over the quadrennial time, it's easy to say how much work. No, it's not easy to say. We don't say it very often, but how much work is given by people who sit on these boards. I did want to introduce very briefly, there is a gentleman who has wonderfully decided to help me cover these meetings. He's not licensed, but he does have a doctorate in theology, and he follows our counseling issues very carefully. He's currently reading the rule book line by line. His name is James Harriet. He does not speak for us, but he will speak with us. And so you'll see him from time to time as we kind of exchange boards depending on who's most available. I do want to again say good morning to you all. We so appreciate your work. We do have comments that don't always agree, and we will send those in writing because I think we're more capable, not more capable, but we're more astute perhaps when we put things in writing and more careful about what we have to say. So you'll be hearing from us in writing and just brief comments of greetings in our board meetings. And again, we appreciate your time and your service. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Martin.
Ms. Martin, good to hear from you.
Dr. Don Irons, do you have public comments you'd like to give?
Yes. My name is Dawn Irons, counselor educator at Liberty University and LPC supervisor in Denver City, Texas. I want to share my observations of the LPC board meeting I witnessed on September 20th. On 2 occasions, BHEC attorneys Daryl Spinks and Robert Romig warned the LPC board they were getting into dangerous territory that could be considered lobbying with the resolution of supporting the counseling compact. They warned that lobbying was prohibited by law. Dr. Jamie Stubblefield explained to the new public board member, Sean Shakarami, that the purpose of the resolution was to alert the legislators of the need to approve the counseling compact through legislation and to show them the LPC board was in favor of the compact. Dr. Armuno echoed that sentiment, saying that the purpose of the resolution was to reaffirm and communicate to the legislators that the board supports the compact. As a public member of the board, Sean warned of his concerns for unintended consequences and was generally dismissed by the professional board members in a condescending way. It was embarrassing to watch as a member of this profession. The legal definition of lobbying is the act of trying to influence government decisions, such as the passage of legislation or the executive approval of a bill. The LPC board is now on public record acknowledging their specific purpose and intent to communicate to legislators and encourage their support of the compact. 8 of the 9 LPC board members voted for this. Sean Shakarami was the sole negative vote. He voted his conscience. Applause in response to the no vote broke out from several counselors in the room. The LPC board was legally advised against certain actions, and they crossed that legal line anyway. They participated in lobbying efforts by passing this resolution rather than heeding the advice from BHEC's legal staff and their own public member. Every professional member that voted to pass this resolution participated in an illegal act of lobbying and needs to resign their position on the LPC board. My question for the BHEC Council
30
is,
seconds.
how do we now undo this resolution in support of the counseling compact? This resolution attempts to speak on behalf of all Texas counselors to the Texas legislature. And I can assure you, the LPC board does not represent my position, as I emphatically do not support the counseling compact. So what's our next step here? Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Irons.
Dr. Starter, do you have public comments you want to give?
I do. Good morning, everybody.
My name is Dr. Terry Ann Sarter, and I'm a licensed professional counselor and supervisor in private practice. I'm also a counselor educator and the liaison to BHEC for the Texas Counseling Association. I am also grateful for the opportunity to serve on the BHEC Rules and Standardization Committee. TCA appreciates the council for allowing stakeholders to make public comment to express concerns. We have a strong appreciation for the council and individual member boards. Thank you for allowing TCA to have a voice in the quadrennial rule review process. We appreciate the thorough review of the rules, which promotes additional clarity in the minimal standards and reduces and/or ensures that there's no conflict with other laws. More specifically, the removal of 681.41 C and D due to the lack of counselors' control in client perception, beliefs, and the behaviors associated with services received or those desired. Additionally, while this has been stated in the actual definitions for quite some time, thank you for clarifying for LPC associates and supervisors that only actual time spent counseling may be counted as a direct hour. We appreciate the council and respective member boards on working together and providing updates to elements associated with participation in interstate compacts, which can increase mental health services provided to Texans. We are closely following the board's efforts to collaborate with other states, such as the Psychology Board with Oklahoma, which the compacts should not pass in the upcoming legislative session. These efforts provide pathways for both licensed professionals and the public in meeting the mental health needs. On another note, TCA appreciates the very informative conversation which took place in the LPC board meeting on September 20th of 2024, which contained aspects which may need to be taken into consideration. And we are glad to see the discussion of coordination of efforts with other state agencies, such as the Texas Department of Insurance, on this meeting's agenda. Lastly, with mental health on the forefront, we look forward to the discussion of public education efforts needed to highlight the importance of consumers seeking out services from licensed mental health professionals versus unregulated and untrained individuals who consider themselves coaches in mental health. These efforts further protect Texans from potential harm. We appreciate the continued opportunity for the
30
public,
seconds.
current license holders, and future mental health professionals to participate via Zoom and review the recorded meetings later. This is a great resource for the next generation of mental health professionals. On a personal note, my students do comment that they have learned a great deal from witnessing these conversations and the commitment, support, and thoughtfulness of the board members and council. More importantly, they see the humanity of the board and its members. To the members and of BHEC and licensing boards, we truly appreciate your service, dedication, and time, and we respect all of your
3 minutes.
efforts in working with us. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Sarter. I have one quick question. You mentioned 681.41, and then I didn't catch the other number.
C and D, just C and D.
C and D.
681.41 C and D.
Oh,
They were removed.
okay, got it. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I appreciate all y'all's efforts. Thank you for working hard for us.
Thank you.
Sorry, Dr. Sarter. Let's see, Michelle Bachman, do you have public comments you'd like to give?
Yes, thank you. Good morning. I'm Michelle Bachman, a licensed professional counselor supervisor. I'd like to inform the board about a conversation I had with Senator Mays Middleton in August of this year. Senator Middleton is one of the authors of Senate Bill 14, the law banning gender transition surgeries on minors in Texas. I mentioned to him that it appears that the language in the law lacks attention to mental health issues and clinicians. I asked him if he knew that Texas mental health counselors and social workers may be writing letters for children to have surgeries, and that those letters could potentially be used across state lines to access surgical interventions in other jurisdictions. Senator Middleton was not aware of this, nor the fact that some mental health practitioners will provide letters affirming gender transition only after one meeting with a client. The senator said that the SB 14 law applies to all healthcare providers and that it makes gender transition surgery a reportable crime, and additionally, that there is a duty to report any mental health provider licensed in the state of Texas who provides these letters for children to have gender transition surgery. The senator told me that when the legislature is back in session, this will become fully clear. But for now, the law applies to all HHS providers who serve any child under the age of 18 with no exceptions. Senator Middleton is aware that I'm sharing this information to an open meeting of the board today and asks that the board or any other interested parties reach out to him with questions. Additionally, I would like to urge the board to provide guidance to all licensees about the ways we as clinicians can follow this new law in our state. Thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Callie Clemens, did you have public comments you wanted to give?
Hi, yes, thank you. Good morning, everybody. My public comment may not apply to most of you, but I just wanted to express how upset I am with the length of an investigation. We are now going on day number 614 of an investigation against a licensed master social worker who got paid off to throw off my custody case, which she admitted. The attorney on the case, Brian Clark, stated that they had a professional reviewer and he did find probable cause and violations. I was told after our informal conference hearing in July 30th to be exact, that the case would be finalized the next week. And it has now been 77 days since that. I have missed out on statute of limitations to pursue civil action against this woman. And she is still advertising her services on neighborhood pages as a doctor, which is also a harm to the public. So I just wanted to express how upset I am with this. And I have now been speaking with the Texas Tribune Investigations Department to try to get in to the board and try to figure out what is going on, because part of me is thinking that they are now working with the other side of my case to prolong this to make it to where I can't sue them. So I'm just very upset. I feel like since this is paid by our tax dollars, that y'all should be kind of digging and helping the victims who are harmed by your license holders. But that's basically all I want to say.
Thank you, ma'am.
Clemens.
Mr. Francis, do you have public comments you want to give?
Yes, my name is Will Francis. I'm the Executive Director of the National Association of Social Workers, Texas and Louisiana chapters. I appreciate the hard work that BHEC does, all of you with your member boards, and those of you specifically on BHEC. We really appreciate your work. I just wanted a couple things I wanted to raise. A recent workforce study was actually just released by the Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board, the Steve Hicks School of Social Work under Dr. Franklin. There's a lot in there. I really recommend you all reading it. I will be happy to share a copy of it. But one of the big things that jumped out at me is the fact that Texas is the third highest state in need of social workers, and that by 2030, we will have the largest and most severe shortage of social workers. We need more social workers. The workforce has to be focused on. And I think there's a lot we can do in that regards. I think the compact makes a whole lot of sense. It really does expand folks' ability to build their businesses, to raise their economic status, to reach out and connect with folks, both within and without the state. We would love to see a Spanish language licensing exam in social work. I know the Psychology Board is doing some wonderful work exploring what examinations mean. I think a Spanish language exam for the social work is vital. We look down at the Valley where we have some of our largest disparities in test taking, where we see major shortages. Would love to see folks have the opportunity to test in the language they're practicing in. The corporate practice of mental health would be a wonderful step forward. We have that from the medical space. Corporate practice of medical requires that clinics and places providing physical care be at least half owned by those with medical backgrounds. We would love to see folks with mental health backgrounds own their own businesses, or at least half of them, so that venture capital doesn't necessarily come in and push those folks out of the way. And then we would love to see the rates addressed and how folks work with insurance companies. And then finally, I'd just like to say, I often hear the word woke as a substitute for fear. And I think what's so vital about social work is that we really support the right to self-determination. We understand that there is a First Amendment protected right to the clinical space, and that pushing ideas of what we think parents should and shouldn't be doing with their children, or what we think should and shouldn't be discussed, is really harmful to ultimately the mental health space. And the fact that every clinician ought to have the opportunity to engage and support in conversations. There's a very sobering fact right now, and that is that the number 3 cause of death in this country for folks ages 10 to 24 is suicide. It is suicide. And it should just flatten us all to hear that our youngest folks are taking their own lives. So much of that is because of behavioral health needs. We need to be opening these spaces to folks. We need to be inviting them in a room, and whether they want to talk about their identity, their sexual orientation, what's happening in bullying in schools, the stress from COVID, all of these things, the welcome mat should be out there. So I appreciate you all and the work you do, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak.
Thank
Thank
you,
you, sir.
Mr. Francis.
Okay, that's all the individuals with hands raised, and I don't see any telephone callers, Madam Chair. So that concludes public comment. You got the written comments that are in your meeting materials.
Thank you so much. Let's go to informational items, number 4 on the agenda.
Okay. The first item up is going to be of course, it's the typical first item is the annual and Q4 performance measures. The only thing I'm going to point out on them is there are 2 issues. The one, the total number of pending complaints is beginning to creep up, and then our average time for processing complaints has crept up a little bit too. We're pretty sure that this is attributable to the attorney situation. We've got kind of a bottleneck going on in investigations with the attorneys right now. That's one of the reasons why we're asking for 2 additional attorneys through the LAR. We've also had one attorney leave us, I guess within the past month or so, as when Vicky left. So we're now down to 3 staff attorneys right now that are handling everything. So that's gonna have an impact on our ability to process complaints. But we're well aware of it, and we're trying to compensate for it. We're going through the hiring process right now to try to fill that position. But that's on our radar. But I just wanted to point it out for you and the public. Beyond that, I don't really have anything to report on anything additional on performance measures or the year-to-date financial report. The only thing I would ask on 4B, the year-to-date financial report, is I want to make sure that everybody submits your travel reimbursements well before the end of the year, because that can really mess up our end of year accounting whenever y'all don't get that in. So that's just a kind of a request there. Update on the licensing functions under 4C. We've had 1 key staff in the LPC program retire. Susie has left us for greener pastures. She's decided to retire. With any luck, we may be able to coax her back, but we'll see. So we're going to be shifting some people around to deal with that, help spread that workload out. We're also trying something. Robert's got a few ideas on how to kind of address customer service, improve our customer service. One of the things we're going to do is Robert McGregor have been working on getting Teams phone systems set up so that when people are working remotely, up until today, that person had to either return a phone call on their cell phone or take calls on a personal cell, because the agency doesn't issue cells. That's not an ideal setup by any means. So we're trying to set up a system where we use Teams. There's a phone call feature in Teams to do that. So just kind of be watching for that. Those of you that are applicants, going forward, that'll probably be something you benefit from. But anyway, we're working on that. Update on enforcement. That you guys have got the materials in your meeting packets there. Everything is rocking along pretty good. One thing I would say, kind of point out, is on the enforcement status report, which is something that's in every meeting packet. We're going to be looking at that thing and trying to do kind of an overhaul of it and see, is there some way we can provide you with better, more relevant information? We're always looking to see, is what we're giving you what you need to know or what you want to know. So if you guys want to see something different on that report, you don't have to think of it now, but if you want to see something different on that report, let me know so that we can try to figure out, is it something we can include? Sometimes people ask for things that we don't have any way to calculate or get, but if it's something you want to see, for example, we don't have on here cases that were resolved following contested hearings at SOA. Well, there's at least two of those on here that aren't reflected in these numbers. So we're trying to change these reports up to give kind of a more accurate reflection of what the workload looks like. But like I say, if there's something you want to see, just let us know and we can see if we can get it on there.
And for the benefit of the public, we're not allowed to comment or decide while a case is active or even discuss it.
Correct.
I'm thinking of some of our public comment.
Yeah, yes, we can't even acknowledge that a complaint has been filed. Complainants are free to speak as they will as public comment, but we cannot speak about a pending complaint.
Yeah, just a general comment on complaints, like is how seriously we take them. I know throughout my tenure on the board where and I appreciate when we hear if there's problems that we need to look into, because we do. What this forum though is not, and I haven't seen it used this way today, but it's important to note that this is not the place to air out the complaints. Because candidly, when we have to go decide this stuff at an ISC, depending on, I mean, there's a chance you could conflict us out and kind of tie our hands from actually doing as much as we'd like to do. So I always appreciate the feedback and the experience from the other side, what the public is feeling on this. Understand that we take that seriously. But we're very do not take our silence as dismissiveness. It's that we cannot comment on it. So,
Chair Hobauer.
Thanks, Daryl. We're 5 years into BHEC. I would request, and this can be very much on the back burner, but sometime maybe like a year from now, we have the 5-year comparison from start of BHEC to where we are now, because the year to date is great information, but and this is something I did discuss with Tim, and I think it sort of got lost, but I would like a summary of where things were at startup and where they are now. I know there's been lots of improvements in that realm. So again, this is back burner, especially with the staffing considerations right now. Perhaps something to maybe take a look at next summer and to go over at either September, October BHEC meetings a year from now. Just kind of a comparison to what we began with and where we are now. I think a 5-year is a logical time to do that comparison.
Right, like a look back. I think that the public would be so impressed with the work your team has done. It blows me out, blows me away.
We can do that, Mr. Chair, Madam Chair.
Yeah, again, very, very back burner, but just for informational purposes.
I got so many chairs here, it's hard to keep track of who I'm chairing.
Okay.
Okay.
Thanks, Joe.
All right. Okay, are there any questions kind of on really A through D? Hearing none. 4E is just the agreed orders and dismissals. They kind of speak for themselves. You can see what all orders have been entered, the dismissals. 4F is the PSYPACT report. I'm going to hand that over to Patrick. Just give us a brief update.
Just briefly, there's going to be an annual meeting for PSYPACT in November, and it will be in Washington, D.C. It'll be the first time they're meeting in person since 2019. So that'll be nice. But other than that, it's just moving along well, and there's over 12,000 APITs, authority to practice interjurisdictional telepsychology, issued, and text is responsible for 938 of those 12,000.
Okay. The next is going to be the update on the budgeting process and hearings for the 26-27 biennium. Currently, you guys have seen the LAR, you know what we're asking for. We've had our joint budget hearing, which is the budget hearing between the Office of the Governor and the Legislative Budget Board, and then the agency. It's kind of the very first time where you make your case for your budget request. We've had that. That is all we've had so far. The Senate and Finance committees won't begin conducting their hearings until once the legislative session begins. We don't even know who those committees are yet, obviously. So once it starts, it will be fast and furious, but until then, it's probably going to be pretty quiet as to what's going on there. I will say that just so that everybody knows, prior to submitting or actually once we submitted our LAR, we started looking again. We were asking for money for laptops and certain key staff salary increases for certain key staff. We managed to scrape together the money for both of those LAR items out of our existing budget. So that reduced the amount of our requests from 5 to, I think, 3 now. We've got 3. So that's always a good thing when you can reduce the number of requests you got. Now, the only remaining items that are for which monies are being requested is the alternative exam for psychology, staff salaries to basically to fund. We've got 5 or 6 vacant FTE. We have the FTE positions, but we don't have the money to fund them. So we're asking for that. And then money to fund what we call a continuous query through the National Practitioner Data Bank, which is, think of it as like a running background check on people for disciplinary actions in other jurisdictions. It works a lot like like the criminal rap back does, except it's for administrative actions in other jurisdictions. We're technically supposed to be doing that on each renewal. That is physically impossible for us to do. So we're asking for the money to do that.
And this puts it in real time?
Yes, it would be real time. So it's, you know, the minute it gets uploaded to NPDB, we would get notification of it. So, and it's something that statutorily we're required to do. So we don't really have much choice there.
Daryl, is that both new applicants and ongoing that they would look at?
The continuous query would be for ongoing or existing licensees. We already run all new applicants through the NPD, but we don't. We're more heavily reliant on self-reporting once you're a licensee. This would, you would still have the duty to self-report, but we're also going to know if you don't tell us. It's going to pop up. So, and the NPDB also has information about lawsuits, litigations. From time to time, some of our providers will get sued for malpractice or something along those lines, and it pops up in an NPDB search result. So, next item up is going to be the discussion on the impact of the Loper Bright Enterprises versus Raimondo case. Okay, I'm gonna, Chair Hallbauer, I would say you slap me if I'm getting too geeky here on this, but you're not here, so I can geek out. This case is actually about something called the Chevron standard. At the federal level, under U.S. Supreme Court precedent, federal agencies were always granted a great deal of deference in their interpretation of their own statutes and their own rules by the federal courts. We never did enjoy that in Texas. Texas has always said an interpretation of agency rules or agency statutes rests with the judiciary, the courts. The agencies don't get to really get any deference. That has changed in the federal system. They have repealed the Chevron standard now, or overturned the Chevron standard. Now they're going to be much more like Texas. This case doesn't really have any impact on us whatsoever because we never enjoyed the Chevron deference, is really all that's in here for. The public, you'll hear a lot of members of the public get kind of worked up about, well, how is this going to change anything in Texas? Probably not, unless you're practicing in the federal court system. You're probably not going to feel any impact on it. So that's the only reason it's in here, is to kind of dispel any myths or rumors that are floating around out there about how this is going to be some watershed change for us. It will in some states, but it will not for Texas. So, Chair Hallbauer, did I say anything wrong?
No, Daryl, that's completely correct. Pretty much consensus opinion is exactly like you stated. Most people are kind of thinking about what's next based on this holding. But as far as just a direct impact on our licensing standards, I have no disagreement with your assessment.
All right, good. I don't get a demerit then for the next meeting. So, all right. Unless there's any questions on that, I'll move on to the report on the Children's Mental Health Strategic Plan Subcommittee. I'm actually going to turn that over to Dr. Stubblefield, who is the BHEC delegate that serves on that subcommittee. She's out here in the audience. Let me bring her up. Janie, can you hear us okay?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Go ahead.
Good morning, BHEC and Chair Conseco. Thank you so much for the opportunity to serve in this capacity on the Children's Mental Health Strategic Plan Subcommittee for this past year. I do want to let you know that the Children's Mental Health Subcommittee has made a lot of progress in regards to the report. We right now have completed the rough draft of the report for the governor's office. It includes recommendations from 5 work groups. Those 5 work groups are governance, service array, family and youth voice, workforce, which we've talked about a bit today, and then metrics and outcomes. We, as a committee, have reviewed the rough draft and sent back other things that needed to be either edited in some form or fashion. And the report is right now with the writers who are finalizing all the graphics and content and just crossing all the T's and dotting all the I's. 2 things of note that I wanted to report that are included in the report that I think this committee needs to be aware of. One is a recommendation to amend chapters 503 and 505 of the Occupations Code to add subchapters to facilitate joining the Counseling Compact and the Social Work Compact respectively. Another thing in the report is a recommendation to amend the Human Resource Code to authorize LMFT associates, LPC associates, and LMSWs to provide and be reimbursed for counseling services under Medicaid. So those are 2 of the recommendations that I felt like this board would be most interested in. I do want to let you know that the subcommittee is on target with their original proposed timeline. We are right now in the review and revision portion of the report and plan to be able to submit it on time to the governor's office by December 1st. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Stubblefield. Appreciate all the work.
My
I
pleasure.
know it's a big lift serving on that subcommittee.
Yes, thank you so much.
There was one issue, Madam Chair, that I want to jump back just briefly on. There's nothing we can do about it, but I need to apprise y'all on it. It's probably going to fall under 4C. It's the licensing matter. Robert and I did receive an email from DPS the other day about fingerprinting. House Bill 4123 was a House bill passed in the last legislative session. It was meant to correct a statutory authority problem that the federal government said all states, the federal government had basically come in, the Department of Justice had come in and said, hey, all this statutory authority that you states have been using for all these years to conduct your fingerprint background checks, it's not any good any longer. We're not going to take it. So all the states had to go in and correct their statutes. Well, DPS did. Representative Guillen did that. He filed a bill, shepherded it through the legislature. It was House Bill 4123. It was intended to correct the statutory deficiency according to the DOJ. So we thought we were okay in the clear. We get an email the other day from DPS indicating that DOJ can't find a definition for licensed professional counselor associate in chapter 50. Was it 503? They're in. I apologize. I should know that, but chapter 503. Robert and I are trying to work with them to kind of explain to them about how, an LPC, it is a real thing. It's something we've been doing for years, and we're trying to show to them where that authority is, but we're having some trouble there. I don't know what's going to come of that. I'm just trying to put that on y'all's radar so that you know that there's an issue boiling there. We're watching it. We're doing what we can. It's not going to be a regulatory problem that you guys can solve. It's just something I'm letting you know is bubbling outside. So that was the only thing in my prior reports that I missed. The next item
For fingerprinting. Applicants.
Yes.
Correct.
Yes.
What happens when an applicant's fingerprints are so damaged that they can't do it electronically?
You run a manual check on them. Yeah, there is a way to do that. So that happens pretty often. So there's a system for that.
Thank you.
The next item up is going to be 4K. And it deals with the economic. You're probably wondering why I've got something from the economic tourism development. The only reason I put this in here is because I'm currently participating in the governor's executive development program. And when I saw this presentation, what I thought was, good Lord, we're going to continue to grow at an exponential rate, the state is. And the only reason I put this in here is to try to kind of reinforce the need. One of the things that they kind of gave everybody kudos for was and I'm not using it in a political sense, but the kind of the conservative regulatory approach that Texas takes when it's regulating professions. And that, is very conducive to a good business environment, to the type of growth we're seeing. So the only reason I put that in there is to kind of stress the importance of what BHEC is and what it does. We are here to make sure that nobody gets, we don't pass anti-competitive regulations, that we have statutory authority, and that whatever does come out the back end, it doesn't violate any kind of good governance standards. And with that kind of growth, you're going to have that kind of self-discipline and self-policing in order to be able to handle the kind of growth that you're going to see in that document there. It's actually rather mind-boggling, the amount of growth that they're projecting for Texas in the business and the population sector. So we're already in a deficit in so many things. Now, that I don't know that it's fair to point a finger at anybody and say that, but we got a work cut out for us is all I'm saying. We can't take our eye off the ball here is the only reason I'm including that in there. Nothing we need to do on it. And then the last item is going to be 4L, which is the notification of statewide controls. You don't need to do anything. That's just an FYI to let you know we're undergoing statewide audit. All agencies are. We don't actually have to do anything on this audit, but I just keep y'all apprised anytime we get selected for an audit. And that's it for informational items, Madam Chair.
Thank you so much. Let's move on to action
Oh,
items.
I did.
Oh,
I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Madam Chair. Robert pointed out I skipped 4J. Which was the Mental Health America report, but y'all talked about it. Again, that was included to kind of show you the kind of the uphill fight we're facing on that situation out there. So I think y'all talked about it when, was it Mr. Jones? Yeah, when Mr. Jones gave public comment. So not trying to blow past that, but that's it, Madam Chair.
Sure. Thank you so much. I'd encourage anybody who hasn't seen it to access it online. It's enlightening and a little nerve-wracking. On action items, review and consideration. I'm not going to read it. 5A.
You've got two cases pending before you here. There's one for Rudy Bustos and Shanitra Fowler. We'll go with Mr. Bustos first. That is going to be,
It's a licensing denial and it's a chapter 108.
Okay.
Give me to give a just brief synopsis real quick.
Yeah, if you'll give us lay it out.
Mr. Bustos applied for an LMSW. He was denied because under chapter 108 of the Occupations Code, it states that an applicant for either a social work or a psychology license shall be denied if they've been convicted or placed on deferred adjudication for a felony offense involving the use or threat of force. Unfortunately, Mr. Bustos had, and so by law, we had to deny him. Staff denied him. He appealed to the board. The board also denied him. He appealed to SOA. We went and had a SOA hearing. SOA also issued a proposal for decision, finding that we by law must deny him. And so it came back to the board. The board approved the proposed order that's before you today to deny his application. And if we can give him a few minutes to speak, we've invited him. I don't know if he's in attendance or not.
Mr. Bustos, if you are in the audience or your attorney, if you or your attorney in the audience, please use the raise hand feature. I run a search. I didn't see anybody by the name of Bustos in the attendee list. We have one phone caller. I'm going to check with them to see. Caller, are you Rudy Bustos or Shanitra Fowler? Telephone number ending in 5934. Are you Mr. Bustos or Miss Fowler?
Where's it star?
Okay.
6.
Be *6 to unmute yourself. Okay. Taking your response as no. All right. Mr. Bustos does not appear to be in the audience.
So is he appealing to us to be heck?
Oh,
And is that something that we need to read?
we have to issue the final order that based on SOA's proposal. And so an order was recommended by the social work board, and that's in your packet to deny his application.
The bottom line is that there's something in his record that by law says we shall not issue the license. There's not really
Correct.
discretion here unless we want to do just the law. This is, we shall not issue this license. And now we're voting to
Correct.
either do that or not.
Does it
Correct.
require a vote?
What's that?
Since it's.
Yeah, we have to follow the law.
Shall not.
Yeah, I want to follow, I'm going to follow the law. I don't know if you guys.
I'm gonna follow the law too. I just didn't know if it requires
Yes.
a vote.
Yeah,
Okay.
well, we'll have to move and
Ratify.
so,
yeah.
Okay, then. do I hear
I'm
a
gonna,
motion?
I'm gonna move to deny this application.
And I'll second Chair Berlinwitz's motion.
Thank you. All in favor? Any discussion? All in favor signify by raising your hand or saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Same sign. Motion passes. Thank you.
The next one Patrick's going to lay out is Shanitra Fowler. Ms. Fowler, while Patrick's laying it out, if you're out in the audience, go ahead and raise your hand so I can identify you and get you ready to bring you up and let you talk. Or if your attorney's out there as well, either one.
And I will state, Chair Brumley, you were I believe, on the ISC for this one, so you'll recuse, right? This was a disciplinary case that went through an ISC and then went to SOA. SOA, she failed to appeal at SOA, failed to appear, I'm sorry, at SOA. And so SOA issued a default and remand order back to the agency, gave her notice of that and an opportunity to reopen the case. That didn't happen. So it went to the social work board for recommendation of an order to enter. There is a recommended order in the packet. Essentially, the order recommends issuing a disciplinary order to probate her license for 2 years. There's 6 hours of continued education in the order, and then a revocation of her supervisor status based on the finding that she had quit her job and abandoned approximately 10 clients without properly giving referrals or working with the continuity of care for those 10 clients.
And if that does not happen, like, she's not agreed to this, correct?
No, she had not agreed to it, and that was the recommendation of the social work board when it reviewed this case, as well as the ISC.
Any discussion?
It did go to SOA. She just didn't appear at SOA. Sorry, not appear at SOA. And so a default order was issued. She did speak to the social work board. I don't know if she's here today. She was given notice of this meeting.
Ms. Fowler, one last time, one last chance. If you're out in the audience, I need you to raise your hand so that I can give you the opportunity to speak if you want to. Anybody representing Ms. Fowler? Okay, hearing and seeing none.
I'm going to go ahead and move to ratify this order.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye or raising your hand.
Aye.
Any opposed? Same sign. The motion passes. Thank you. Meeting dates for fiscal years 26 and 27.
We have in your meeting materials here, you've got a Word document that says the possible council meeting dates for the next biennium. We just need y'all to select which one you can, if you want to do it just as a group. It's so far out. We try to do this so far out so that y'all don't have any conflicts with anything. It's easier to build around these dates, I figure, than the other way around. So if you want to just select the first group of Tuesdays, that's fine. Or if you want to mix and match, you tell me.
And this is for 26.
I like the first of the group.
These are for dates, Madam Chair, these are for dates beginning in September 1st of 2025, going through August 31st of 2027.
I think it's important just to mention that my term will be up at, I believe, this next time. And while I've loved serving, I probably will not continue this time. So you all need to be thinking about that. And as such, I have no vote on the dates.
Well, go ahead and stick your predecessor or your successor with you.
Pick the worst set of dates.
Chair Hallbauer.
Not a big deal, but if possible, I just wanted to request on October 2026 to go with Tuesday, the 20th, as opposed to the 13th, but it's not a huge deal.
Oh, that just throws everything off, Stephen.
That's what I'm best at.
I'm looking at February here. Did y'all look at, what is February, President's Day in there? Okay, are those weekends? It is after.
Never recovers from celebrating.
Are you gonna need to buy a mattress that weekend?
No, I'm
Is
just thinking
that-
about people's
that the
trips.
concern?
No, I'm really just thinking about trips in terms of both for the board and for staff. If anyone was taking
Yeah,
something
chance
there.
for a kid's vacation possibly.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah,
the only
what's
thing.
what's a vacation?
I don't even know.
When you have kids our age, what's
Really,
a vacation, Mark?
You're very right.
It's just a family trip at that point.
Very true.
Yeah, I mean, all these are fine for me.
So are the first Tuesdays with the exception of October 20th, 2026. Is that right, Stephen? That's the date you.
That would, if it's, if we can do it, then yes, the 20th.
We can absolutely do
This is
it.
your chance to make a motion. Do we need a motion or is that?
Just say it. You're the chair. Just say that's when it's going to be.
That's what it's going to be. It's going to be the first group with the exception of October, changing from the 16th to the 20th. I don't want to bang my $3 gavel for Christ's sake. Not today anyway. Let me think. The number 5C, and I believe that this discussion of public education efforts is something that I brought forward. So I'll take advantage of being the first to speak. As we look at the shortage, the workforce shortages, the issues that are potentially so damaging to children, and not just the conversion therapy issue that's been discussed, but the suicide rates, the reactions, both in the short and long term to shootings and the fear that that's brought to families. And as I would assume that, either thoughtfully or without realizing it, the fear that is then passed on to children, which I would equate, even though I'm not a professional, now I think I am one, the adverse childhood, I can't remember what that's called, traumas, adverse childhood experiences. It's something that I think our children are being raised at a time when things are much more impactful, much more profound, but also when mental health is finally letting go of the stigma that's associated with seeking care. I see that more and more, even on, on things like, I can't say specifically, but Peppa Pig or I have grandchildren. And so I'd like to see us take advantage of that in the schools, especially with those of you who are professionals. And I was thinking about a task force, about specifically what can we do in schools that will help the children navigate an increasingly complex world. I tend to, since I'm a CEO of a nonprofit, I just tend to be pushy. And so I'd like to sit back and ask, what's the best way to take advantage of an encouraging atmosphere? I'm proud of what Texas has done. I'm proud of our state's approach to mental health issues and behavioral health issues as health. And I'd like to take advantage of this more inviting environment as we tackle, more profound issues like workforce. What do you all think? How can we move this forward? And I yield to you who are professionals.
Madam Chair, there is an organization, the Grant Halliburton Foundation. In full disclosure, I am on the board of that foundation. Like this one, I am not paid on that one either. But it is a wonderful program that has very different forms of education in the school systems, as well as peer support groups in the school systems. And they've seen a lot of success deploying these into some program. So perhaps maybe we can invite them to a larger conversation.
I think that would be wonderful. Is the Meadows Mental Health Group doing anything specific to pediatrics? Do you know?
Not that I'm aware of directly, but I
They're
do.
more policy.
Yes,
is that
ma'am,
right?
more policy. Yes, ma'am.
Right. I think that would be great. Or other groups could be invited that any of you are aware of in your fields, John?
I think when I think about the megaphone that we have, it's actually not, we're a regulatory licensing board and it feels like we don't have that big of a megaphone all the time. What I will say is that when it comes to children and mental health services, one of my biggest focuses has been putting more soldiers on the field, putting more players on the field, however you want to put it. And so most of my efforts in that regard have been around how do we find more pathways into this school psychology profession. I've said for a long time, if you can see it, you can be it. And that was sort of the idea when we called them LSSPs. They're still LSSPs, but we were one of 2 states that didn't call them what they were, as we all referred to them as school psychologists. And so trying to understand trying to get young people to understand that's a career path. It's a lot easier to sell school psychologist than LSSP to an 18-year-old or, somebody in college. So it started there. And then figuring out how do we get people, and adjusting our rules where we required a psychology degree exclusively. Now we can look at related degrees. So somebody who's a school counselor, would not have been eligible to be a school psychologist under our rules of, less than 24 months ago. Now they are. Now they still have to go meet their educational requirements of that. But for people in the profession or other things that are, close to a certain thing, we're providing more pathways for them to either get into the profession or to stay in the profession.
Are public and private schools required to have a counselor or a therapist or something?
Private
like that?
schools are not.
Private schools
I
are
don't
not.
believe so. Public schools, I believe are, yeah.
Required, licensed and.
Required, but what functions they provide vary wildly.
And yes, within public schools, there's you have to have an LSSP for so many amount of children or students.
Right.
So there's kind of it's not necessarily one for every school, but they will cover a large amount of schools.
Sure.
But I was actually on that point of school psychology, just potentially bringing in TASP as well, just as involvement to maybe provide some insight on that topic that you brought up about how do we get help in these schools. I think TASP is a good place to just maybe, we can ask some questions and sort of see if they could join the table.
I think that would be nice. We have a program that began at Clarity Guidance Center in San Antonio. I believe it's a nonprofit. I can't quite remember, but they started a program about young minds and had peer support groups, and it was funded to a point and then stopped for some reason. But while it was funded, I believe it was successful. So maybe gathering a few of these groups informally first at a task force so that we know what the landscape looks like, and maybe engaging some of our associations like the ones represented here. I think that would make some sense. I agree, John, that we have a megaphone. This might be, a little off topic, but anyway, it's my last term.
What I will say though, too, is that within the megaphone that we have and the audience that we have, I think one of the most important things that we can do is signal to the people who have bigger microphones on this is that we will not be getting in their way. We will be a part of the solution. We will be helping, because so many times disengaged regulators or regulators that are just, I don't know, just not engaged. We are engaged in this, and we are going to do our part to either help or get out of the way.
Right.
And that's truly, as a regulator, I have plenty of opinions and ideas and thoughts that I would love to do if I had a wand or the authority to do it. But I mean, even some of the rules we're going to take up today are things that I would prefer not to do, but we've discovered that we don't actually have the authority to do them. And that's for somebody else to do. And so being cognizant of who are we and what do we do here and what is our prerogative and our power. There's a lot of problems out there we don't have the authority to do. And not that I'm not sympathetic and not that I don't think they're good ideas. It's just not our our ability. We just don't have that ability. And I think it gets a little scary when you have regulators who, with great ideas and whatnot, that they don't have the authority to enact. that's a sketchy,
this
scary
might be
place to
more
be.
of a conversation starter, an information.
It's a, yeah,
gathering.
I'm glad we're having the conversation for sure. Yes, absolutely.
Okay, thank you all so much. So if you don't mind approaching your group and if others can look around for us, maybe we could see where we are in terms of a conversation starter.
We'll try to get something going, Madam Chair, get it coordinated.
Thank you so much.
Madam Chair, real quick,
yes.
would it be agreeable to do H now, since this is kind of in the same vein, with, definitely with Chair Bleemowitz's comment on, not our audience, not our megaphone, I think.
I have no objection. It's H is discussion regarding coordination of efforts with other state agencies.
Yeah. Go ahead, Robert.
To provide access.
Sure. So, Madam Chair and council members, this came up from Dr. Taylor and I attended a conference this summer of the all the associations and regulatory boards for counseling. And in the conversation about workforce, I'll sort of lay out the problem and then let Dr. Taylor talk about solutions. The acute problem of workforce shortage, one of the conversations that came up is about how reimbursement and how much money plays a role, and that it just is a fact that professionals can't operate, and we can't encourage more professionals if they can't make a living doing it. And so questions, the sort of topics that were brought up are things like what we heard earlier about the reimbursement in Medicare and Medicaid for associate licenses and provisional licenses. And then also generically, the amount of providers who are choosing not to accept insurance anymore because of the bureaucratic hassles and because of the reimbursement rates. And that then drives folks more toward private pay models. It not only excludes people from the profession potentially, but also means the folks that are in the profession is harder and harder for average citizens to access that service if they can't use their insurance. And so that was the conversation that led us to think critically about what relationship we can have to that.
Yeah, and just like John said a minute ago, I mean, we do not have the ability to regulate this problem. We as a board, as a council, cannot solve that problem, right? But the problem as a whole, I think our approach is let's reach out to people that can and say, if we can help you, let us know. If we can do something that can help you, let us know. I mean, I've had a few therapists now reach out to me privately saying that they had a major commercial carrier do a clawback on their services they provided 2 years ago, which according to the Department of Insurance, they're not allowed to do, but they didn't know that. And it caused them to close their practice. Yeah, several therapists in that. They have about 10 therapists in total in that practice that are now out of business, unable to provide services for people in that community, which was not technically a rural community, but a border community, right? And that is a problem. That is a very big problem. And that's not one that we can solve. But Robert and I thought it might be a good idea if we reached out to other people that might be able to.
Is it anti-competitive in any way?
That is a great.
So can I make sure I understand this? You're saying that an insurance company tried to claw back money that they had paid 2 years prior in contravention of TDI rules.
Right. Yeah. TDI says unless it's fraud, they can't claw back more than 180 days.
See, and that's the thing in terms of like communication in terms of who do we communicate to, where's our megaphone go, and to what audience. That is an audience we can communicate to. And I don't think there's any reason that we can't say, hey, you should talk to TDI. If you have an issue with this, but blah, 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 you can call TDI and they'll listen to you. Right?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
But I think therapists or many therapists, especially the ones that I talk to that had this problem, were afraid
to call TDI?
If I go to TDI, because they don't know TDI.
Yeah.
They don't know how TDI is going to respond. They don't know, does TDI work for them or does TDI work for the insurance company, right? They are confused. And so they don't know how to go through that process. And one of them specifically told me that they were afraid that it would cause them to basically the commercial carrier would drop them, and that would also ruin their business.
See, and that gets to be probably more of an anti-competitive thing.
Yeah. So that's where it gets into that weird space. Where, so not our megaphone, not our audience, but I think definitely a good conversation.
But ultimately, that's an issue with the insurance carriers. I mean,
Right.
like they're not allowing reimbursement and they're clawing it back. So, I mean, I feel like that's kind of where the buck stops. You've got to address it there and then it can trickle into these other commercial carriers. Otherwise, this is going to be a continual problem.
Oh, yeah.
At the same time, the stakeholders need to be informed. So professional associations could easily pass that information on that we've just discussed. But yeah, it does have a sort of the smell of anti-competitiveness. And I certainly understand a fear of retaliation or just, the end of your career. Yeah, huge problem. Okay. Anything else?
That's what I have. Thank you, Madam Chair.
That's a good call. That's a good call out. Thank you for putting that on the agenda.
Yep.
For the council members, I can also share there was a recent Senate hearing where insurance issues about insurance came up. And so this conversation is happening not just in our field, but other fields, but also the associations are talking about this, legislators are talking about this. And there was a fairly palpable concern by a number of senators, or House members, I'm now forgetting which senators, about sort of the old adage of times are rough, gas prices go up, times are better, gas prices go up. And that the making, but in the insurance context, they make these changes and the insurance companies don't necessarily respond with the changes that they were hoping for. And so I think to those watching in the associations, I think there is interest at a legislative level of having meaningful responsiveness and access to care.
Thank
you. Any other discussion on that item? I see that it's approaching 12. Do we need a break? I also know there's a need today getting through the agenda. Need for a break, or would we prefer to? Okay, let's carry on. And since we have a quorum, you can step away individually at any time as needed. I see a chat. Thanks. Mine doesn't have the little side panel. Yeah, is that somebody that you needed to hear from on another one? Okay, just checking. Okay. Then we're on item D, is that right?
D, correct.
Okay. So there's a draft document asking about members to, well, who's got?
Madam Chair, I'm gonna let Mr. Romig lay this out since he was at the board whenever this issue came up, at the MFT board.
This carries over in that same vein about education of the public and seeking mental health services. The MFT board had the idea and was interested in getting the rest of the board's input of having a document or a page on our website that is informative about the types of licenses we provide from a consumer perspective of what services does each license provide. And if you were asking yourself, well, I might need mental health care, who would I seek out? And so the draft document that you have is just a very rough first stab of a concept of what if we did try to set this down to help guide people. But then, of course, they recognized that they did not want to be defining your profession for you. And so really just raising this up as a discussion of would this be useful? And if so, how does each board approach defining their licenses for the public?
Any discussion? Any thoughts?
Yeah, I have some questions. Well, sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I don't think it's a bad idea at all. I just think that we definitely left out LPA, we left out LSSP on there. So there's a couple things that were left out, and then I think just refining for instance, definitely on psychologist, I think it could be rewritten a little bit there. I just don't think it's like a great summary of what we do. It's a little vague. So just if we can kind of actually
word craft
it a bit and kind of come up, again, you said it was a very rough version, so wasn't expecting that, but but also adding the LSSP and the LPA to that list as well would be beneficial.
Madam Chair, my question is we're getting into in a document that we're talking about ratifying, putting it up on the website. That's not a rule, that's defining professions. And it's also defining professions that we have no regulatory control over, like peer coach, pastoral counselor. Like, this is one of those things, I was kind of talking about it earlier about what's our lane, what are we authorized to do and not. We don't have the statutory authority to define really what these other ones are. I can see work went into this. I appreciate, I think, greatly the idea of its mission. I'm not sure that the long-term, I'm not sure of the long-term benefits and perhaps even liabilities that it creates in trying to define professions and then scope of profession. Because I mean, if you look at, we all know this, is that if we had to draw a Venn diagram of what all the professions do, there's a heck of a lot of overlap. And there's a lot of it too, even in terms of from psychology, of what psychologists can and can't do. It's defined by competency, which like that's not actually like codified anywhere of what competency is, and deliberately so, because we want, if people are competent, they're proven to be competent, then they're competent. And if they're not, and we get a complaint, often it's pretty obvious that so-and-so was not competent, and we have sanctioned those people. So I just think, while I appreciate greatly in terms of the communication of what we're trying to accomplish here, because it's defining a lot of professions, and some of which we have no jurisdiction over, I have concerns about it.
And what was the original, I mean, can you give some context behind like what?
Sure. And the definitions you see there really is, don't take any of the content as, it's just to illustrate the concept.
Is it though, Robert? Because Janine specifically left out couples in the definition for an LPC. So I'm a little upset that she resigned before I could get upset with her about that.
That's it. I can assure you it was not a underhanded way to try to scope out, any.
In Janine's defense, she was not at the last LMFT meeting, so.
She didn't write this. I think the desire was, it really stemmed from a desire to think, when someone is potentially wanting services, how do they know whether to come to one of our licensees versus either someone who's licensed by a different board or someone who's not hold a license? And how does one judge the type of services that are available from a licensed counselor versus a psychologist versus a life coach that does not hold a license? Chair Lemelitz raises very good points about how fraught that is, and trying to describe that, which is why we very heavily suggested, and the MFT board said, yes, we need to have this conversation at the council before we even go down this path. Candidly, we as staff would very much, if you did go down this road, first recommend that each board would need to be solely in charge of defining whichever licenses it wants to define, so that you're not defining each other. But then also the question of unlicensed professions, what could we say comfortably when we don't regulate those professions? But that's the desire, is to provide some amount of education for fields that aren't regulated and don't have a definition.
Robert, was there any discussion on from the LMFT board side of trying to help providers that are either duly licensed or dual rolled? Was that part, like if I have an LPC and I'm also a pastoral counselor, and I work at a church or something, or if I'm an LPC and an LMFT, or if I'm an LMFT and I also like to do coaching on the side, it's a totally different business of mine.
It really was, this conversation was really just from a consumer standpoint. That issue has been identified probably for a future rule conversation to make it clear for those licensed folks, especially that have a license with us and then also an unlicensed profession, to make clear when they are acting under the license and therefore under our jurisdiction. That is on our radar, but I don't think that's what this document was.
And it was just going to be on the website, like basically a tool, like it's a tool that people can just, or a resource essentially is with their money.
So I also want to, oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
I'm a commercial real estate broker, as y'all know. Something we have to provide is called information about brokerage services, and it defines very clearly to the consumer who's on whose side of the table and what does it take to put somebody on your side of the table, which, as you can imagine, in a real estate transaction is probably one of the most important things, is know who's on your side and not. But it's all done from a consumer protection standpoint. If this document feels similar in terms of what its objective is, which again, I really appreciate the objective. But like in my case as a real estate broker, the law for me providing this to clients or prospective clients is it's a high bar. Like it has to be given like on first communication. So it works similar. The only thing I can put it similar to would be informed consent. Unless we're going to like create some sort of promulgated thing that way, like that to me would be the way that this should be communicated to the public. And I'm not sure we're ready to do that at this minute.
So I think we can agree that our end user is the consumer, correct? And I think we can agree that people with higher educational attainment can probably figure out what the different professions do. So that now we're going back to my area as access to health for low income, potentially low educational folks. In my field, it's dental care. But if we treated this as a sort of a definitions page and didn't make it such an extended document. So if I were doing it without your input, I would do one-liners written at the 8th to 4th grade level. If you need help with such and such, you might want to look at this, or a clinical psychologist is someone who does this. I would definitely not touch any kind of interplay of roles because it gets complicated. And I would definitely not do more than a simple definition. I personally I think that people just go to Google like the Oracle and look at something simple like that. But I do think that something very, very basic that describes a general role, what is a social worker and what are the different maybe degrees and what do you go for? What do they offer? Just a simple definitions page. I think that would be the way to approach it, but anything more complex or legal than that is just going to add another hurdle for the person who's seeking help to jump over. Even though it's not in our lane, that's true. But we could be one of those points of entry for people who don't know what to do next when they're feeling troubled.
Chair Canseco and Robert or Patrick, would definitions corral or limit? Since it wouldn't be a rule, would it be considered?
No, and
limit?
you would need to to make sure that did not happen, you would need to make sure the language was very clear that this was not a rule and was not in any way defining the allowed scope of practice. Okay. That it was simply providing a general guidance.
So in Chair Belimowitz's model that he talked about in real estate, so there's residential and commercial. So do you have two documents?
No, it's actually the same for residential and commercial. It's the same document because it's the same importance, because it's, if you call somebody on a sign on a building and you don't know any better, you might think that person is just facilitating the transaction, which no, they actually work for the other guy.
Okay.
And if you tell them, oh, I love this place and blah, 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 and now you're going to overpay by 25% because you spilled your guts. Gotcha. And that would be one of the things that by law on first communication, that listing agent would have needed to give you this document that says, oh yeah, I don't work for you. I work for the other guy. Okay. And so that's why it's important there. If I can just say one other thing that's coloring my comments, we'll probably talk about this in a minute. I just got back from the Senate where I got to witness a whole big conversation across the nurses, the doctors, psychology. But one of the biggest things of the day was scope of practice. And so understanding the food fight that exists over scope of practice makes me very resistant to wade into it in a document that could very easily be maligned, misunderstood, or just simply turned against us.
And then
So-
our resources are all pooled into something like this that could be used in something else to
Yes,
move
ma'am.
along the workforce shortage.
Yes, ma'am.
So I'm going to backtrack. I take it back.
Well, and specifically to that question of resources, I would just for y'all's understanding, the vote that you would be taking today would be not posting this document. It would be voting if you think it is worth pursuing. And in that case, we would then ask you as board members to write these definitions. We as staff are not going to put pen to paper at all because we are not in the position to define this for you. So just bear that in mind. If you did consider this worthwhile, y'all would be the ones having to work on this.
And Robert, don't all professional organizations already have a definition of what exists?
We're on the
We have
statute.
subchapter B, right? So
Yeah.
everybody's got a subchapter B, which defines our scope of
Defines that scope of
practice.
Yeah.
I think it says methods and techniques. We have like 16 points or something like that in each of them.
I know TPA has a web page dedicated and lays out. I haven't looked at TCA, TIMFT, or
And that's
ASW.
candidly the right place for it. And I would point anybody who wants a more layman's term explanations of it, like I'd be happy to point them there. I just did from this perspective, from this seat, I'll just say that if anyone from the MFT board comes back and watch this, like it is with deepest appreciation for the mission that I think we're trying to accomplish here, but I'm not ready to allocate resources to this minute.
And we do have links to every member board on our website as well. Any other conversation or can we call this question?
Yeah, I mean, I also have reservations about like listing life coach and peer coach and all of that on our website. I don't think that's needed at all. I really don't think I don't think that's a good idea.
Yeah.
And I'm guessing just no action, right, for this item? Thank you, everybody. That was a good discussion. Where was I? An item C. Oh, E. Are we on E? Yeah, oh, that's an E. Tell us, Daryl, where we are on the famous ASPPB, EPPB.
Well, this is really just in here to provide you with an update if something came up in the interim. Nothing has. We haven't heard back from the Federal Trade Commission. So nothing to report there, Madam Chair.
Anything anecdotal you want to share? That, John?
This is the only ASPPB EPP2 topic on this, correct?
Well, F.
Oh, and okay, we definitely have some stuff to talk about, the
Yeah.
updates on the discussion on the agency efforts on the bylaw change, but regarding
The only thing on
with regarding E with the FTC case, I'm certainly not going to advocate to go into executive session now. We may need to think about that, but certainly with time constraints, I think we should keep plowing ahead right now with today's meeting.
the only thing on E, Madam Chair, I would say is that ASPPB issued a letter basically wrong. What you would expect them to do. But
And they retained counsel.
yes, yeah.
Okay, insert eye roll emoticon, and let's move on to item G.
Nope.
F, sorry, yes, but we didn't, I thought we just talked about that.
No,
This was the bylaws.
No,
change.
this is more granular.
Okay, go for it.
Do you guys want to? Okay. Well, I'll just yeah. So the thing that I can tell you is that our conversations with other states have progressed quite well.
Excellent.
There's a lot of states that have popped their heads up and spoken with us directly. There's a lot of states that have been speaking on the record in public that we don't even have to talk to. We can just go watch their meetings, which I've done a lot of. I know you
Many,
guys have.
can you tell us? More or less?
I mean, I'm trying to think. Is it a dozen? Half a dozen? How many have you watched?
I've watched well over a dozen.
Okay.
Yeah.
I love it when our state takes the lead.
It's interesting though too. I mean, because I'll talk about Oregon because I watched Oregon's discussion at length. Oregon voted to support our bylaw change, and they based on their meeting they're sending somebody to Texas to Dallas, and we'll be voting for our bylaw change that would essentially make the EPP2 optional. That said, I'm so glad I watched their meeting because there's a lot more nuance to the discussion. And does Oregon agree with Texas, on exactly, why? Actually, no, they don't. They got there through some very different logic and different reasons, but they got to the exact same place that essentially ceding, regulatory authority to a national board that is unelected, of which right now only one of their board members is actually a regulator on their respective state board. The rest of it is people who have rolled off of their boards and are just members. And my understanding of their bylaws is that these board members on ASPPB who are making these decisions couldn't even vote to elect themselves to the board position.
Oh, my.
But that's how it works. So Oregon, though, doesn't like being told what to do either. Essentially, if I had to sum it up as concisely as I could. And they have reservations about being told what to do. And they said for that, we're going to support this. So again, they don't agree with exactly all of our reasons. But this has been the interesting thing about this whole discussion is that even within our own discussions within our own state, across, liberal and conservative and red and blue party line, if wherever you hail from, are all arriving on the exact same point. This is not the right course to tackle the problems that we're having, in Texas, places like Oregon. Trying to think, we've got some other what are some other states that have?
You got 8 that have publicly voted to publicly support the bylaw change. And then I'm counting, I don't know if they publicly, but I'm counting them as hard nose 4 so far.
Daryl, have all the jurisdictions had an opportunity to read your letter, your explanation letter? Because it's really well written and I think it lays it out.
It's
very,
difficult
very
to say, Doc, because Robert and I were originally removed from what we call the BARC listserv. And we were not allowed to disseminate our explanation through the BARC listserv. We could disseminate the bylaw change itself, but not the explanatory material.
Can we explain that for the layman and
BARC.
the public members
BARC.
and why and what?
Yeah.
Hang on, I'll just say it I'll just say it plainly. You guys were trying to advocate for something that ASPPB disagrees with. And instead of allowing the conversation to happen in the channels and the listservs, the way we would usually communicate, they took them off the listserv and silenced them. And have made it very difficult for us to have that conversation.
And the reason I asked that is just, I think everybody needs to read it. I just do. And hope they all have the opportunity to do so.
We've had to generate our own listserv outside of ASPPB to do this. And in fact, we've got a meeting set up tomorrow with the group. So we're going to meet with them one last time before the annual meeting at the end of this month to try to see where everybody falls on the issue. But it has been very difficult to communicate because ASPPB was the mechanism for states to communicate. And now that system is broken. And it is extremely difficult to get states to coordinate. So you talk about workforce issues and, imagine trying to do it on a national level when your mechanism is broken and you can't use it to communicate. We're having to rebuild.
Are there state psychology boards that could receive? I'm guessing you've already done that. Sent your explanation to state psychology regulating boards like ours?
Yes, and so we have just to make sure it's on the record because I know they're in the audience, so I want to be fair to them. We sent then our explanation letter through our own channels to try to get to all the states. We have also shared it with the state associations who have shared it with each other, and then very recently ASPPB sent out their own letter explaining why the bylaw change is not a good idea. And in that they did link to our proposal and our letter. So it has been disseminated through ASPPB.
We're great. I'm grateful for that.
Yeah.
I'm grateful that they linked to that. And it certainly did more to disseminate our point of view than I think we had even been successful at ourselves. So.
Mm-hmm.
We've got it in order for this to change. It's a 2/3 majority at the meeting. It's a high bar. And no matter what happens, we can already see that there's a lot of states with very diverse political leanings and diverse problems, between urban, rural. If you look at New York, New York's a great example. And if you watch their meetings, I mean, if you think about the differences in the needs of the state, the differences in the political makeup of the state, and we are all both arriving to the same conclusion.
Right.
And again, if we lose the vote, I mean, it means that, you know, the small states like, you know, Montana literally has the same weight as New York. And so will we get 2/3? Don't know, but we're going to find out, and everyone's going to be on record.
Excellent work. Thank you. Excellent leadership.
Chair Hallbauer has his hand up.
Who is attending on y'all's behalf?
So it's in Dallas.
Yeah.
So we've got we've got two of our professional members, Dr. Cartwright, and Dr. Becker will be there. And then myself. They asked me if I was getting a hotel. I could see I hadn't registered to the hotel yet. I told them that it was on my commute to my office, and I'm looking forward to seeing them there. They're very kind to follow up about that. And then we've got staff that's going to be there as well. And so
Robert and I will be attending.
Okay. I would like to publicly reiterate my support for this course of action. I think you guys are very methodically, very logically working through the issue in a course of events that really makes sense, that shows that we have disagreements on this, but we are following really all the procedures necessary prior to the quote unquote nuclear option on this. And again, for wholehearted support from me.
thank you. I will say, in terms of my discussions with everyone I've had, is the way that if I had to put odds on it, I mean, 2/3, it's a Hail Mary pass. But the way that but I don't know, with some of these states coming around our way, like, it's not outside the realm of possibilities that we could actually win this vote. But either way, it matters how we win, and it matters how we lose. And I'm really very proud of our professional members and our staff, of how they've conducted themselves throughout this whole process. So thank you, Chair Hallbauer.
Now, you guys have submitted your briefs. Now go win at oral argument. No big deal.
Thank you, everybody. And I'd be interested in attending, depending on the weekend.
Come on.
And I don't need my expenses reimbursed. I have grandchildren in Dallas. Okay. So that's E, F, G, an alternate. Oh, that's it. Okay. H we've done. So we're on I, 5I, on the quadrennial rule review. Tell us all about
That's
that.
Mr. Romig's
All right,
bundle of
so
joy.
Hey, Robert.
we spoke to you. We started this back in February, and we presented you our initial findings at your June meeting. Since that time, we have had 4 town hall meetings, and really appreciated folks' turnout. We held open public comment for a good long time, and got a bunch of comments on both our findings, but also other rules people felt need attention. In your packet, you have 5 PowerPoints, essentially one for each board and for the BHEC rules, identifying some rules that we will talk about here in a minute that need action right away because of statutory issues or administrative issues. But then we've also identified a few areas where we think there could be cooperation and standardization across the boards, that we will bring you, things like agency administration, how we're running our committees and board meetings, but also just nomenclature and use of things like virtual technology and telepractice, making sure the rules are updated to reflect that it's 2024 and we're all using that technology. And then at the end of the PowerPoints are the broad topics that are really our roadmap for the next year or 2 or 3 of the priorities that we need to look at. Not everything will be brought to you with changes, but our commitment through the rulemaking, the rule review process, was we would take all of the comments in, and we will, at a rule committee meeting, look at every suggestion people made. So for the public, that may not end up going forward. The boards may not agree that it needs changing, but we will have that conversation. And so, excuse me, happy to answer any questions y'all have on all those rule review findings. What I would ask for today is a vote to approve those final findings and to post the notice of the close of rule review in the Texas Register.
Any discussion before we think about that? Then do I hear a motion to follow as directed by, or as requested by Mr. Roman?
So moved.
Second? Second. All those in favor signify by saying aye or raising your hand, or both.
Aye.
Any opposed? Same sign. Motion passes. Thanks, Robert. It's a lot of work.
That was a big task, Mr. Roman, going through that. I know we're not over yet, but
Rulemaking. I'm going to ask Daryl, my mouth is getting a little dry. I wonder if you'd proceed with walking us through the rulemaking.
sure. We're gonna try to take these in groups, kind of adopt proposals in mass, adopt the adopted rules in mass. If you have any questions about one, or you want to pull it out for discussion, we can do that. But we're going to try to kind of do this in as expeditious way as possible. So,
and we can ask questions in the en masse, but if we wanted to pull one out to discuss or just vote on separately, we could. But we
Correct.
can just ask you as we go.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. And Robert and I will try to lay these out. I'm going to do the BHEC stuff, and then I'm going to turn over to Robert to do the others, because a lot of them are products of the quadrennial rule review. So he's going to be more versed in them. Starting out, 881.20, rulemaking by the Executive Council. It's the only proposed rule for BHEC. It just merely removes duplicative language. So just need y'all to vote to propose that change.
Here,
It's the only proposed.
Oh, okay.
So
I'll second.
all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Same sign. Motion passes. Thank you.
Thought you were going to go a little longer.
well, it was only one proposed rule starting out, so it does kind of throw the gate off a little bit. The next group is going to be the rules being considered for adoption. We've got 882.14. It's petition for waiver or remediation deficiency. This is actually a global remediation rule built off of what psychology had started years and years ago. Several of the boards have adopted it. We're just trying to make it more global and standardize it across everything now. I'll point out on this rule in particular, you're going to see staff start to bring you more what we call global or standardized rules that will apply evenly across all the boards, rather than trying to duplicate and copy a rule in each board. That we feel like this will probably be the more efficient way to go. So that's what we're doing there.
Can I just make an editorial comment on this?
Sure.
We have psychology board. We have dealt with a lot of instances where you've got somebody who is, I mean, they're qualified, and it's some ticky tack thing that either we need the ability to say, go do X or go do Y, and we don't have a rule, and we essentially, our options are deny or go wheels off. And this actually provides us some guardrails to get people who are qualified, plainly qualified, into the field, or plainly are short of, a class or an hour, a couple hours of supervision. So this is going to be really good for everybody.
Yeah. 882.21 license statuses. This rule change does two things that we're asking you to adopt. It keeps the licensees from running out the clock if they've got a pending complaint and letting their license expire. We can keep it alive long enough to close out the complaint. And then two, it also makes clear when licensees can practice under the different license statuses. For example, if you've got a restricted license, you can still practice. It's just restricted under certain conditions because you got a disciplinary order. 884.10 is the investigation of complaints. It just kind of clarifies the standards for when we can dismiss a complaint. 884.60 is repealing our old witness fees rule. And then we're replacing it with a much better, more fleshed out version that it's really a more comprehensive and more detailed approach that we've learned we needed. And then 885.1 is the executive council fees. We're just making fee changes that correspond with various other rules that you're going to more than likely adopt today. So with that, Madam Chair, we're asking for adoption of those 5 rules under 6B.
Do I hear a motion?
Move adoption.
Second?
I'll second.
Is there any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying, yeah, aye, or raise your hand.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign? Motion passes.
And I'll turn it over to Mr. Romig now.
So under items 7, 8, 9, and 10, what I'll do is I'll take the A's first, all the proposals, and ask for a vote on all the proposals, and then I'll walk through the adoptions and we'll do a separate vote for those.
I do have one that I'd like to pull out. I'm
Absolutely.
curious about I'm curious about the issues that were raised under the professional counselors. I didn't understand what the problem was with a PhD. It sounded like I should know what the quarrel is and what was a decision made on conversion therapy. I didn't understand what that was. In other words, what led to that comment?
Yes.
Okay.
Happy to. I'll talk about those. And there's not a rule here, so you don't have to pull anything out, but I will discuss.
Thank you.
So in items 7A for marriage and family therapy, these proposals are all in line with the rule review findings. By and large, I'll happily answer questions on any of them that you'd like to,
Sure.
but the board has adopted recommended proposing all of these. They are eliminating language that is not really enforceable from an enforcement standpoint when it depends upon proving the client's mental state or expectations, and instead relying on rules that more directly prohibit a licensee from using fraud or deception or misinformation that is still not allowed, that will still get your license disciplined or revoked. The other is taking language out related to I've lost the word now, the complaint, conditional letters of agreement that we don't use and don't have the authority to do. We haven't used in years anyway. And then the one in here is 801.115. This is actually a proposal to replace the rule that you've already proposed repealing. The old rule was not something that was allowed under statute. This new proposal, 115, would mirror the professional counseling rule that essentially says if you're coming in from out of state, you just have to meet the minimum statutory requirements. You don't have to jump through the detailed rule-based requirements. Under 8A, these are the first two, 463.9 and .10, are rule review. These are jurisdictional problems. Under .9, we were allowing LSSPs to get a license prior or practice in schools prior to getting a license, but after their school, that's simply not allowed under statute. And similarly, on .10, we were allowing psychologists who had been practicing in another jurisdiction less than 5 years to waive in certain requirements. Again, that's just not statutorily allowed. For both of those, the board expressed great desire to have those and wishing that they could provide those opportunities. But we're sort of like the MFT board for their rules, we're informed you don't have the authority.
If I can just add there, like I've read the comments, I've heard the arguments, I'm sympathetic and don't disagree with them. It's one of those things that but we had the power to do it, I might think differently, but we don't. And that's why we're doing it this way.
And so that they should pursue that with their legislators if they're interested in doing so.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Then under the 463.31 is not a rule review. That is simply altering the jurisprudence pass score for psychology to the public comment earlier. This is one of multiple reforms to the psychology jurisprudence exam that we are looking at. We have not seen any scoring problems. And so certainly if you Ms. Grothues or others, please reach out to me directly to talk about if you've seen something like that. But what we have seen is there are some questions that needed updating that were tripping people up. We have now deleted problematic ones or updated ones that had some flaw in the question. But in addition, we could look at the overall pass rate and see that the difference between a 90% pass score and an 85% pass score was highly meaningful. There was a very significant band of people that were right there just below 90, and we felt like meaningfully should consider to be passing. And so the board recommends lowering the pass score to 85 because that's gets the target graph. So that's 8A. 9A under professional counseling. All of these are rule review findings. They are eliminating duplicate language that's unnecessary. They're eliminating unenforceable language and rules that deal with client mental state or expectations. They're taking out language that we can't really enforce because it's governed by other law. But again, as I said with the other rules, these maintain all of the rule language that say you cannot commit fraud, you cannot use deception, you cannot benefit from deception or misinformation. That does not change. Regarding there were public comments about the PhD issue. That will be something that we'll bring to the board to reconsider. The board previously adopted and the council adopted a rule that allows people to write in and update their license if they've now gone from a master's to a PhD and to put PhD on their license. It was a little controversial at the time. It continues to be controversial. And so we will put it back on the board's radar to consider whether that has actually provided a benefit or whether they want to recommend repealing that change.
Displaying the credentials or not displaying the credentials?
Yes, exactly. It's sort of taking somebody who had a license and now adding that new
Academic
PhD credential on their license.
Surprises me that it's controversial, but okay. And thank you.
Yeah, so that will definitely be a point of discussion. And then I'm not sure about the conversion therapy specifically. I don't remember that public comment, but certainly any public comments related to scope of practice they're in the packet. They will go in front of the LPC Rules Committee.
To the LPC member board.
Yes.
Correct.
And anything that then relates will work its way up to y'all.
Okay. Thank you.
It's important for the public to remember that BHEC scope of practice standard of care issues cannot originate here at the council level. They have to originate down at the member board level. So I just want the public, don't anybody out there think BHEC is going to take a top-down approach at a scope issue or a standard issue. We're kind of like the ledge. We don't want to deal with the scope stuff until it bubbles up through the member board. So
since it came up in several comments, I just didn't understand what the issue was. Thank you for the clarification.
And then finally, 10A, the social work proposals, those are also very similar in nature to the rule review findings of the other boards. Duplicate language, statutory problems. I will note that in the motion, so what I would ask for is your motion to propose everything under 7A, 8A, 9A, and 10A with the caveat specifically, you don't need to remember this, we'll deal with it, but 10A4 and 9A9, we left out a clause that needs to be struck in line with the other amendments. It's non-substantive. We did it for the MFT board. We accidentally left it out of the same language for LPC and MFT. It's just striking that conditional letters of agreement that we don't have authority for. And so
the motion would be to approve items 7 to 10 in the section A, accepting these two that you mentioned?
with the
Caveat.
non-substantive correction by staff.
To 10A4 and 9A9. So moved.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye or raising your hand.
Aye.
Any opposed? Same sign. Motion passes. Thank you. Thanks, John.
Thank you, council. So that brings us
To Bs.
back to Bs.
Mhm.
So these are the rules that have been proposed in the register, and those with public comment were noted. So under 7B, these proposals were, the MFT board chose to be a bit proactive and get ahead of the rule review. And so little 1, 2, 3, and 4 were all just making changes to clean up what was allowed or not allowed under statute, all in terms of recognizing experience or education components as allowed in statute. And so this is really aligning all of those with what is allowed. Their statute is fairly prescriptive, and so it's aligning with the minimum required in statute. Again, that's repealing .115, the old one. Y'all just adopted a proposal of a new one, just to be clear. 801.201 is finally enacting the MFT temporary license, which y'all proposed many months ago. The database is ready. We're ready to go. As soon as y'all say yes, we'll flip the switch and people can start applying. And then B6, the MFT board actually recommends withdrawing that. And so they'd like to study their continuing education rule a little bit more before they make any changes to it.
Is there one in place now?
Yes, there is a rule in place. This would have changed one of the added a requirement.
Mhm.
And based on the public comment they got, they would prefer to go back and think about it more. And so they ask you not to adopt that rule.
But it's pretty standard for all behavioral health fields, professional fields.
Yes.
Okay. Do you want us to do
B.
this one separately, or are you bunching them again?
I'll bunch them again unless there's
Let's bunch them
objection.
again.
Yeah.
It's faster.
That's the majority of the rule adoptions. 8B is removing the health specialist, health service psychologist certification. That is something we don't use or need. It doesn't take anything away from anyone. It's just clean up. And then there are no adopted rules for the counseling board. And then under 10B, the one social work rule to adopt are changes that clean up the practice language. It gets complicated when you are an LBSW or LMSW or LCSW, where you can provide clinical services. And so it's making that much more clear and making sure it's okay for people to remote work. Some of the language in the old rule made it seem like you couldn't do remote work, but now you can.
Okay. Do I hear a motion to approve as reviewed by Mr. Romney?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor, any discussion? All those in favor of approval signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. Motion passes.
Thank you, council.
Thank you so much. Any reports of member boards? I guess we can just kind of go down the line. John, do you have anything?
We've already talked about the updates from us.
Brian?
Social work has nothing to report, Chair.
Anything to report?
No, ma'am, we do not.
Okay, anybody else? Mark? Okay, well, great. Then the next one is any recommendations for agenda items for the next council meeting? Anything special?
I imagine psychology will be updating the board of what transpires on Halloween or around Halloween at the ASBPB annual meeting.
Good. I look forward to hearing the good news.
There'll be news. I don't know if it'll be good, but it's gonna be something.
Good. Anything that we do is progress. Then thanks everybody for attending, and I think this meeting is adjourned, and it's, well, this is kind of a record, 12:25. Thank you, and thanks all of you who came in online. Appreciate it.
Do we need to vote on that or?
Well, I don't know. I was
just
just gonna.
you just
bang
There's
my-
no
gavel it
objection.
down?
It's gonna